Hello, this is Daniel Daly. This is a Noahide sermon. Rainbow Torah occupations. Rainbow Torah occupations. Okay. Essentially, jobs which the Rainbow Torah generally advocates. Gardening. Adam's asked to till and keep the garden. And potentially gathering of foods. Gathering of fruits and vegetables, potentially a gatherer of fruits and vegetables. As humans' population increases, potentially someone to gather the fruits and vegetables for the group. To pick the fruits and vegetables. Okay. Clothes maker. God felt it was best after Adam and Eve knew they were naked for them to have clothes. He doesn't go on making clothes for us, quite obviously, so clothes making, and for larger groups, like many of his occupations with larger groups, they can be to a degree industrialized and made into a business potentially. Because as the population gets larger, you can have people who this is their specialized work in the community. Normal enough idea in large populations. It's quite sensible. It's a rational use of human labor. Sensible and logical use. Okay. Genealogist. They keep genealogies, the family records. Historian, who keeps general records of what's going on in society, because the Rainbow Torah is historical record. So a historian who keeps the records, and obviously the records are to be studied because they're being kept. So the knowledge of the records. Teacher of the history, a teacher who teaches the history of the records being kept. So a history teacher, a historian who knows it, and someone who also teaches it, and a record keeper. So you could have scribes as well, someone who writes down the notes. And scribes. Scribes teaches the academic sorts who concern themselves with the records. Now, builder, because they build cities. There's cities built in there, so builders who build the buildings in the cities. Now, it doesn't specify what the buildings were made of, but one might imagine potentially huts or rock buildings or something, but builders of some sort. Okay, now when we get to Lamech and Tubal-Cain and Jabal and Jubal, we have artificers and bronze and iron and instruments, musical instruments and livestock. So we have farmers and musicians and metal workers. Then when we get to Noah, we have carpentry, because Noah knows carpentry. So we have people who make musical instruments and musicians, people who perform on musical instruments. So makers of the instruments and those who perform on the instruments. So musicians and instrument makers. And metal workers for the various metal objects which they seem to have made. Artificers in bronze and iron, so they probably made axes, I guess, and saws perhaps, and I don't know, picks and things, stuff like that. Who really knows for sure? They might have made nails as well and hammers. We don't really know for sure. That was potentially used with the ark. We do not really know for sure. Not in the record of the Rainbow Torah, but they're the kinds of things which potentially were part of it. So we have carpentry with Noah building the ark. Okay. Okay. Now Noah also plants a vineyard and makes wine, so that's winemakers. There's a lesson which the drunkenness led to a problematic situation, so the wine itself could possibly be okay enough to drink, I guess. Drinking wine is perhaps it's a Rainbow occupation regardless. It's in there making wine. So if wine was made, then one might imagine that fruit juice was probably also made. Orange juice and apple juice and the various juices from the fruits, they were probably made as well. If they made wine, then they probably made fruit juice. Now, there were measurements, there were mathematics, because Noah had measurements for the ark. So mathematicians is an occupation which can develop as time goes by in a larger and larger society. And they would have obviously also had some uh, equipment or sort of tools used for measuring, some measuring devices. So people who make measuring devices like yardsticks and things like that, whatever was used, a cubit stick, I suppose, measuring devices. So people who make measuring devices, rulers essentially, take measures if you want to get like the modern era, but essentially rulers, I suppose. So cubit rulers, I guess, something like that. Maybe even ropes. Who knows? Long ropes which lengthen off cubits and things. Who knows? So yeah. Now the Tower of Babel, of course, is another building project, and yeah, another building. Bitumen and mortar, by the looks of it. Now we can eat animals now. With the giving of covenant time, the giving of the time of covenant, you can eat animals. The blood must be drained, but animals were permitted to be eaten. So butchers, a butcher is a Rainbow Torah occupation, sort of providing meat and being the marketer for the meat, the provider of the meat, a butcher. So that's some of the Rainbow Torah occupations. I suppose I could possibly think for a few more, but that's some of the Rainbow Torah occupations.